watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Hello, and welcome to our second episode of MidSouth Matters on Germantown Municipal Television. I'm your host, Ruth Dunning. My guest today is Amanda Magdalena, a veteran of the Peace Corps. Amanda Magdalena is currently a PhD candidate and presidential fellow at the State University of Buffalo. She holds a master's in Latin American Studies from Tulane, and she served in the Peace Corps in Mauritania for 2 years. First of all, quickly tell us where Mauritania is.
Mauritania. I have a slide that shows the map, but it's in Western Africa, just below Morocco and just north of Senegal.
Okay, very good. So we know where we're
Yes.
living for,
Yes.
for 2
Yes.
years.
Uh-huh.
Okay, right now, tell us about you. Tell us why you wanted to be in the Peace Corps and how you went about getting to the
Sure.
Peace Corps.
I was a foreign language major at the University of Memphis, and I loved traveling. I got to go to Spain to study abroad, and going to the Peace Corps was just always something that you sort of wanted to do. It's this wonderful thing. I definitely had rose-colored glasses going in there, you know, this very Norman Rockwell painting of going to help people in foreign lands, and it was also free. So it was something that I did right after my undergraduate degree and before my master's project. So I was always interested in global studies. Perfect thing to do.
So what was your major language foreign language that you spoke?
My major in the university and the main language that I still most fluently speak is Spanish. I minored in French because I had some class credit hours that I needed to fill. And so that definitely influenced where I got sent in the Peace Corps. When my recruiter found out that I spoke French a little bit, even though it was just conversational, it was Africa. I was going to be sent to Africa. I think that they have a lot of people that speak Spanish, and Latin American countries are just a little harder to get into.
So tell us about the application process.
Sure. So you can apply online. You can go to recruiting events. They're everywhere.
And what did you do? Did you go to a recruiting event?
I was not recruited. I just went straight to the website, put in my information. If they like what you have to say, and if you meet the requirements are online as well, then a recruiter will call you, and you can set up a Skype interview or just a phone interview. Mine was just a phone.
Tell me about the requirements. You said if you meet the requirements,
Yeah.
which are?
Well, I know what they are for English, but they're on there for the other places and things that you can do. But you have to have an undergraduate degree and speak English.
Okay.
Foreign
Fairly
language
broad
experience
categories.
is certainly helpful, but there aren't a lot of requirements. So you get a very big, different group of people that haven't necessarily taught before. So you have a 3-month training program if you are accepted in the end. In which they teach you pedagogy skills. So they put you in a classroom with Mauritanian students, they tell you how to prepare a lesson, how to write on the board, things that you would never think of. And then after that 3 months, they assess your skills, and most likely you will pass, and then you swear in. So the actual time that you're there is 27 months, 2 years, and then 3 months training.
Where did you do your training?
In the country?
In the United States, yes.
Oh, well, it was 3 days in Philadelphia, and then we went to Mauritania.
Now, were you the only one going to Mauritania?
There were 45 or 50 of us at that time, and then there were as many as that already in the country, so around 100 volunteers, and this was 2006 to 2008. But when we got there, we did most of our training in a town called Bogey. Is in the south. That's where most people in the country live. It's a desert country, and there's just a little bit more rain in the south. There's a river that goes there. And after that 3 months, then you sort of get sent to different places all over the country, and everybody wants to be in a certain place. You don't want to be in the desert 12-hour car ride away, or you don't want to be in another place 4 hours off-road, driving. So I got actually a place that was on the road. There's only two.
Oh, that was fortunate.
Only 2 roads in the country, and I was fortunate enough to be on the road. But it could still take about 10 to 12 hours in a car with no air conditioning, or you might be traveling with a goat for 10 hours to try to get back to the capital. But I still considered myself fortunate. There were others less fortunate.
Okay. Tell us some more about the bad experiences that maybe you had or some other people have had, because not everybody comes out of the Peace Corps with the rose-colored glasses intact. It is not always happy.
Yeah, I would say that my experience was a little negative, and I think that you don't hear negative stories about the Peace Corps because sort of the culture of the Peace Corps, that it's wonderful and cheery and they're always doing really good things, and they are, but people do have negative experiences, and I think that those should be heard as well. But my job that I had was to teach pedagogy skills to English teachers that were already there. But the Minister of Education, who made the agreement with the Peace Corps, he stole the funding. He said the funding is no longer there. So I had no way to get these teachers to come to the pedagogy workshops. And so I had no job. I told my Peace Corps boss, and he said, 75% of Peace Corps is cultural integration. So go integrate. And the next day I had no idea what to do. So I went to the high school. I was like, maybe I'll teach English. Maybe they need an English teacher. Well, they did. Immediately. Yes, we'd love for you to teach tomorrow if you want to. I later found out that I replaced a teacher. They fired a teacher because they could get me for free. And they sent his family to a school some hours away. That was a couple of them as far as my actual job. The country that I went to is a very difficult country. It had the highest return rate of volunteers. It was around
people who
40.
did not stay for the 2 years who
Yes.
came back to the United States.
It's called early termination, ETing, and there were pools going around on who would be the next weakling to ET and go home early.
So you were discouraged from returning home.
Yes, and you'd made this huge commitment. They would fly you back if you wanted to go for free, but you sort of lose any benefits that you would have from the Peace Corps, and it was just culturally seen as weak. I, at one point, packed my bags and was ready to come home, called my mom, and she talked me down, and so I stayed the rest of the year. But I went from place to place. I worked at a health center helping babies for a little while. I taught English to people at the World Health Organization, but none of them were Mauritanians. So it was just kind of bouncing around to try to fill my day, which I think is not necessarily the most effective way to spend my time.
Tell us a little bit about your living conditions.
Sure. Well, I had no idea I wouldn't be living in some type of house, but that was the case. I actually did have a house. The first 3 months I stayed with a family, and I did not find that very pleasant. It was a very, very poor family, and I would come home and find them eating without me a couple of times. So
that meant you had no food for the day.
I had less food. They would eat with me in the meal, and then with the money that the Peace Corps was paying them, they would eat. So I just had a negative experience with living with a family, so I chose to live alone.
Do you have a slide?
I think I do.
And what number is it?
It is number 12.
Okay.
You can actually see we slept outside because being inside in Mauritania is way too hot. It gets to be about 140 degrees there at the hottest time. And so you sleep outside in a mosquito net. And anytime that you turn your headlamp on to read a book, you're swarmed with bugs on all sides, giant, huge creatures. It could be a scorpion, have a slide of another giant creature called a habhaba, and I put a knife right next to it to...
what number is it?
We're out of order. I'm not sure.
We'll get it in a minute.
Yeah.
We'll tell you in just a minute.
It's number
Okay.
6.
Number
It's number
6.
6.
Okay.
Yes.
And your knife, you measured
I
the...
measured the habhaba with a knife so you could see how giant it is, but they're huge animals with fangs and they can race really fast, so it's always scary when you go out at night to the latrine. There's no bathrooms or toilets or anything like that.
No, but let's back up. No toilets?
No toilets. There is no such thing. In fact, you're lucky if you have a personal latrine, just a hole surrounded by some concrete walls. Actually, in the rainy season one year, it flooded so high that it flooded the latrine, and all of the contents were out in my yard. One time, the latrine floor fell through, so it's a blessing to have a bathroom. But generally, people just
Cope.
Yeah, they just squat and take care of it.
We have to take a short break. More with Amanda Magdalena when we return. Please stay with us.
This new mom is struggling to get the skates just right. And now she's holding on for dear life. Her kids can see she may have broke her knees. They still love her though she looks like she's attacked by killer bees. I'm allergic. Proof you don't have to be perfect to be the perfect parent.
Thousands of siblings in foster care will take you just as you are.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for information on how to provide even better care for the person who wants to care of you.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Welcome back to MidSouth Matters. We are joined by Amanda Magdalena, a Peace Corps veteran. Now, Amanda, we're back. Tell us about your health while you were there.
Yeah, so we just talked about some giant bugs and maybe lack of sanitation in certain places, and it was generally expected that you will get sick immediately when you get there. I had dysentery, I had giardia, and a couple of other things. We had a girl get scurvy, different things like that. So you immediately lose tons of weight. I lost 40 pounds at the end of 2 years, so I was 99 pounds when I got back. My mother was rather distraught, but it comes from this lack of sanitation. So I have a slide 8, and it has one of my students buying meat at a meat stand, which is an open air stand and completely open to bugs and whatever. So that's how you buy meat. So that's how everybody buys meat, and when you eat it, it's not necessarily good for you. Yeah, so to the left is actually a picture of mishui, is what they call it, but it's just that meat, then it's thrown on a grill. They don't actually have grills though, so it could be a piece of fence, or a tire, a bed spring that they throw it on, and it cooks through. But if you look closely at the picture, all the little black spots are flies. There's about 40 to 50 flies on the leftovers of that lunch. And it comes from, the disease comes from when you cook it, your hands aren't necessarily clean. They don't use soap very often. They believe that if you wash your hands with water 7 times, then you're clean. You also would never shake somebody's hand with your left hand because that hand is used for cleaning yourself after you go to the restroom. They do not have toilet paper. The same slide 8, has a little kettle thing, and it's called a makaresh. And then when you go to the restroom, you fill it up and take it with you, and you clean yourself after you're done. So all that to say, disease happens, and it was recurrent for me for the 2 years.
Mm-hmm. I saw you when you came back. 40 pounds is too much for you to lose. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I was at the airport and running toward my parents. I was so happy and had my pack on, and they had a sign and were smiling, and as soon as they saw me, their faces were horrified.
Mm-hmm. So tell us about some of the demographics.
Okay. There were 4 major demographics in Mauritania, and the predominant one and the ones with all of the money were the white Moors. And you can see a picture of a white Moor on slide 9. He's wearing traditional garb, this white sheet with gold
and that's
lacing.
why he's called a white Moor, because he wears this white garb.
No, because he has lighter skin, actually.
Okay.
So there are black Moors as well, and those were slaves, traditionally. Now, they outlawed slavery in 1981, but it was not illegal to have slaves until 2007. So that was their 3rd try to get rid of slavery, and it is still absolutely there. I saw slaves many times. You just sort of have to know what to look for. The ones that I talked to believed that they had been born into slavery, and that was where...
Almost a caste system.
Yeah, so they believed that was where Allah wanted them, and if they disrupted that caste system, they would pay for it. Mm-hmm. It's the Islamic Republic of Mauritania, so they say that 100% of people there are Muslim.
But that is not traditional Islam, though.
Oh, no. That is certainly an interpretation of it.
Right.
Yeah, so those are the 2 main groups, but there are Pular and Sonike. The Pular, there's a picture of them on the slide. They have very bright, colorful clothing that they hand stitch. All of the little almost looks like tie-dye, but it's each individual, they stitch it, the women stitch it. It's very beautiful. And the Soninke are only in the south, right sort of near Senegal. Also very wonderful and musical and jovial people.
Did you get to visit that area?
I did. It was my favorite place to go, in fact. They have really delicious food. Very delicious, but very different than the northern parts. In the northern parts, they were more herders, so we would have goat meat and rice, pretty much every meal.
Every meal. Tell us about your diet changes.
Yes, it definitely did, and it affected people differently. So I was one of the few women, because I got sick a lot, that didn't gain weight, because it's a very carb-heavy diet with lots of oil and a little meat, and all of the guys shrunk down to tiny nothings. But you eat the same meal every day, and that blew my mind. No, for breakfast you'll have a piece of bread and some tea. They love tea. You'll have tea every time you go see someone. If you come to my house, I'll make you tea. And so that would be breakfast, just bread and tea. And then for lunch, rice and meat. Couscous and meat might be your dinner, but that was essentially the same every single day. If they had vegetables, there would be some, but sometimes there weren't.
Where would you cook? Did you have a house that you actually lived? You slept outside. You had your own latrine. And where did you cook? Where did you keep your belongings?
Sure, I kept them in the house. I was the product of many years of Peace Corps people living in that house, so they'd brought things from Europe and different places, so I actually had a gas stove that I could use. But most people just use sort of like, I don't any actual container, but they put coals in it and they'll cook all day. So all of their meal has to be essentially in that one pot.
So tell us some more cultural things.
Okay. As soon as I got there, I saw all the men, right, holding hands. And I was like, this is very strange. I thought I was in Islamic Republic. Why are gay men everywhere? But as it turns out, men are much more comfortable with each other. They would not touch women, but they are very affectionate with each other. I would be teaching class, and guys would have their arms around each other, whispering things into their ear. But that's just a cultural difference between men and women.
If you can't mix genders, sex,
right,
the same behavior occurs then within genders.
Absolutely.
So tell us about dating. How did people date and marry?
Well, a lot of them were arranged marriages, and an interesting thing is valued men were good hunters with lots of money, and they'd be super tiny, but a good woman would be super big and fat. So they actually had places that they would send the women to make sure that they were marriable. They were called centre de gavinage in French, but that literally means stuffing center.
Okay, we're going to come back and talk more about stuffing centers in just a minute. We'll continue our discussion with Amanda Magdalena after this short break. Please stay with us.
Here's your check. Oh, you got it. You know, since I got rid of my car, I really enjoy walking.
Hey. God, no.
Getting pulled over for buzz driving could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates.
Oh, you're home early. You live with your mom?
That'll set your game back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Hello and welcome back. We're discussing the Peace Corps with Amanda Magdalena, and we're going to continue with stuffing centers, which sounds horrendous.
It is. It's a human rights violation, or it's an issue that is talked about often. But like I was saying, the women, in order to be marriable or desirable for marriage, need to be very, very big, and they get married very, very young. So this is something that happens to them early on. So at the age of 12 or 13, They will send them to a center. Their parents will pay for them to be stuffed full of couscous and milk, different things like that. They say on average 22,000 calories will be consumed by these girls. And
Per day?
Per day, and it's a very painful process. They have to drink tons and tons of milk if they think that they're going to throw it up. They have a tool with which they use to crush their toes or fingers, because if they feel pain, they won't regurgitate it. I actually have an image of that on slide 17, and an image of 3 women at one of the stuffing centers. So it is definitely a human rights issue. It causes horrible health problems for them later. It makes them very immobile. But it sort of comes from an ancient tradition in which women would, if a man could provide well, a woman should stay home and sit around. And so it's
proof of a man's ability to take care of her if she's huge.
It is, and how much wealth he has.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a horrible story. I saw a video of it. One of my people I was in the Peace Corps with actually took a video because he couldn't believe it was happening more than once. It was a poor family. They couldn't afford to send their child to a feeding center. Couldn't afford the couscous, and they were supplementing her diet with anything that they could possibly find. They had a cow, and a man came out every, once a week or a couple times a week, and would bang a 2x4 on the cow to loosen his bowels and pull cow excrement to mix with milk to feed his daughter, to fatten her up so she could be married.
It is unbelievable. I can see why it's a human health issue, and why the UN is involved in
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah. It's beginning to change with Western culture and media.
Yeah.
But it has a long way to go.
Mm-hmm. They all do.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us now about what we think of as being the 1%, and this is not quite the same thing as the 1% in this country.
Yeah, the 1% in this country is very, very different. I felt like I was the 1% in Mauritania. I would never feel like that as a grad student here. But just the perception of us as white, we could go back to America, we could have whatever we wanted. But what the 1% looks like in Mauritania, I have a slide of some examples. Slide 12, you would drink milk. When I first got there, everyone was asking me, do you drink milk? And I'd say, yeah. And they were like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. So they drink lots and lots of it. It is a staple of their diet. So if you can afford to have lots of milk all the time, that's kind of showy. So there's a picture of a couple of my friends drinking milk. You don't buy a gallon of milk, you buy a bag of milk that someone on the side of the street will put into a baggie for you. And then you just sort of bite off the end and drink the milk out of that.
What slide number is that?
It is number 12.
12, okay.
Mm-hmm. There's another picture of a camel in a trunk. People have, limited vehicle options on the 2 roads in Mauritania, so that's how they would carry animals, but a camel is high priced good. I also have a picture of my shower, which is the same slide. And you can't see, I don't know if you can see it in this picture, but it's a concrete sort of thing with just one little spout, but I was always taking a shower with about 20 to 40 frogs that would just live on the side and thrive in that wet climate. Yeah, so being the 1% was quite different. Like I said, I had my own latrine, even though it had some problems. On slide 13, it shows a picture. We actually went to a softball tournament in West Africa, Senegal, which we won. But getting there, we had this fancy bus. We were so excited. It had air conditioning on it. None of the Mauritanian vehicles had air conditioning. Most of them didn't even have things to roll up your windows. You could pass around the little rolly thing to everybody if they had one. But we hit a wagon somehow and got thrown off, so we were stuck in the sand for quite some time. So travel was always a challenge, but still it was totally fancy compared to Mauritanians.
Tell us now about a good thing that can happen with the Peace Corps, the Masters International Program, for example. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. I would still recommend the Peace Corps, even though I had sort of
well, are there Peace Corps volunteers in Mauritania now?
There are not, and that sort of began when I was there toward the end of my tenure. When I was there, a family of 5 French people were shot on the side of the road. A nightclub, which is only Americans, they don't serve alcohol in the country, was grenaded. And so after a series of violent events, they pulled out. So
was that Al-Qaeda?
It was Al-Qaeda. Mm-hmm. So as of now, they have not gone back.
Okay.
But yes, you mentioned the Masters International, which I feel is an excellent program for people to both get a graduate degree as well as experience on the ground. So many different sectors or subject or jobs that you could possibly do: public health, education, nursing. You know, there's a huge plethora if you look at the website. But these universities will allow you to take 1 year of coursework, and then you go to do the Peace Corps. So 2 years in the field, but your field work is actually doing the things that you studied. And it helps you write your thesis. You can write your thesis while you're there. And so I really recommend them. They have excellent schools. I put some of the schools that they have up on slide 20: Emory, Duke, Columbia, Cornell, and they're adding them constantly because they really like the fact that the students get to go and have hands-on experience doing development work or whatever.
Who pays for this?
The government. Well, you would pay for your 1 year. At that school, unless you were able to get certain kinds of funding. I got to go to Tulane for free because I got a foreign language and area studies fellowship. So all I had to do was study Portuguese, and they paid for Tulane and gave me a stipend. And so if you could get something like that, which a lot of these universities offer, then that could be essentially a paid way to go.
So you would, in 3 years, you'd have your master's and essentially not pay for it.
Yeah, you could work it out that way, absolutely. And when you get back from the Peace Corps, you get a stipend of about $6,000. It's taxed, though, so it's a little bit less than that.
Did you have to pay your own way back?
No, they fly you back.
Okay,
Yes.
very good.
It is, yes, it was wonderful.
Anything else? Any other comments you'd like to make in our 30 seconds?
I think that I would recommend the Peace Corps with the caveat of tell them exactly what you want. You know, be as honest as you can about what you want from the program and what you're looking for yourself. But
if you had said no, I want to go to a Spanish-speaking country, that's my area of interest, could you have done that?
I could have. They said it might be harder to get into. They couldn't guarantee it, but I could have pushed for that, and I probably would have been able to go.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
I want to thank you at home for joining us today on MidSouth Matters as we discuss the Peace Corps with Amanda Magdalena. If you have any questions about this or any other show on Germantown Municipal Television, or if you'd like to watch our programming, visit GMTVonline.org. You can also follow the station on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time on MidSouth Matters.